Welcome to the State Bar's weekly legislative update. My name is Tom Bowler. I'm legislative representative for the State Bar. With me usually is Ken Shigley, who's president of the State Bar. He's unavailable this week, so we'll be flying solo. This is day 14 of the legislative session. After today, we'll have 26 days left. And I can tell you that the legislature has gotten down to work this week especially. They always say that the legislature in committee is the legislature at work, and committees have been very active this week. On the big picture, the General Assembly has addressed questions like the Hope Scholarship, charter schools, transportation initiatives. All of those kinds of things are being debated and discussed, and I think we're going to see legislation on all of those items in the next couple of weeks, pass the House and pass the Senate. From the State Bar standpoint, one of the major items is budget items. The state budgets on an annual basis, July to July is the fiscal year, and so during the legislative session we are budgeting on a prospective basis, and then we come in every year and adjust in what is called the supplemental budget or a mid-year adjustment budget. The House passed the mid-year adjustment budget for fiscal year 2012 today. From a judicial branch standpoint, I am happy to report that we had small increases in funding for indigent defense, some $400,000 almost to handle conflict cases. We had a nice increase, an adjustment to the Resource Center budget. We had increases for Superior Court, Supreme Court, Court of Appeals, and so I think the budget for the fiscal year 2012 amended budget was a good one, and we thank Representative Jay Powell from Camilla, Georgia, who is Budget Subcommittee Chairman, for working with us on some of those items that were critical, like the Resource Center, indigent defense, and others. Besides the budget, the House Judiciary Non-Civil Committee this week passed out a constitutional amendment that dedicates funds from filing fees and some other sources to indigent defense. As we've talked about before, the legislature raised filing fees on all civil filings by $15 back in the early 2000s to fund the statewide public defender program. The legislature has then appropriated that money, but not all of it. The fees raised somewhere in the neighborhood of $42 to $44 million every year. The legislature in the past has budgeted or appropriated to public defender defense some $35 to $38 million until this year. This year they did budget, the governor recommended $40 million. We'll see what the legislature does, but that was a very good increase from the governor's office in terms of his recommended budget. In order to guarantee that the fees raised by those civil filing fee increases are appropriated to indigent defense, a constitutional amendment has been proposed by really a bipartisan coalition led by Chairman Rich Golick and Stacey Abrams to support a constitutional amendment to mandate that all of those fees be dedicated to public defender system. A constitutional amendment requires a 2/3 vote, so it's not going to be an easy task. But that bill and the resolution and the accompanying legislation, enabling legislation, has passed the subcommittee and passed the committee and is now ready for floor action. I don't think that'll take place for another week or so, at least, but it's out and it's moving. And I would urge each of you who watch this webcast to email or call your state legislators and urge them to support the constitutional amendment dedicating filing fee funds to the Indigent Defense Program. On other items, the legislature is moving pretty quickly. The House and the Senate have both passed legislation that does not require a lawyer to file the initial response to a garnishment. That legislation passed the House, it passed the Senate yesterday. It's on its way to the governor, and I expect the governor will sign that very quickly, probably next week sometime. There have been legislation introduced to minor technical amendments to the jury selection legislation, comprehensive legislation that was passed last year. Those bills are out of committee and they're on their way to the floor. Transfer fee covenant legislation we've introduced last year and it did not pass. It got hung up at the very final night of the legislative session. That legislation is back on track. It's a piece of legislation that was recommended and proposed by the real property section of the State Bar that prohibits transfer fee covenants on real estate transactions. I believe that bill will go to conference committee in the next couple of days, and we will have a conference committee report that can be agreed to by the House and by the Senate very quickly. Next week, I expect that the governor's criminal justice package will be ready for introduction. I believe also that the international commercial arbitration bill proposed by our arbitration section and supported and endorsed by the Board of Governors will be introduced today, I believe, and I think we'll have action on that late next week, and if not, then early the next week. So the legislature is very active and very busy. It's going to be a very busy committee session the next couple of weeks, very busy floor action, and I would urge all of you to go to the website, follow our updates, and track legislation as it goes through the General Assembly during the next week. And we look forward to being with you and giving you a brief report next week at the same time.